Lonely Monk Productions. Yo, That's My Jawn is brought to you by Anchor.fm. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Take a seat. Let me explain. It's free. It costs nothing. $0 and 0 cents. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Me? I'm doing this from my iPad. It's that simple. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more podcast providers. What's that mean? That means when someone says, hey, how do I find your podcast? You go, you ever hear of a little app called Spotify? Boom, it's there. What's that in your hand, an iPhone? Boom, go to your podcast app. I'm there. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Right from the beginning, straight out the gate, you can make money. Season 1 made me so much money, I could afford a cup of coffee at Starbucks. A grande. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. That's Anchor.fm. I don't know if y'all have heard the new Prince track, Welcome to America, but yo. That's my Jawn! That's my Jawn! Hey, yo, what's good, friends and family, neighbors near and far? Welcome to the 3rd episode of the 2nd season of the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast. The podcast, website, brand, movement, way of life dedicated to the embrace and championing of your passions. I am your host, Nate Runkle, a.k.a. Jawn the Apostle, a.k.a. Johnny Loves Chachi, a.k.a. Nate Bobe, Banana Fana Fofate, Me Mamu Mate, Nate, a.k.a. Johnny Tudos, a.k.a. everybody's favorite Jonas brother, Nate Jonas, a.k.a. Nate 3.0, checking in for yet another podcast. As always, I hope this podcast finds you all in good health and in good spirits. A little later on, I talked to musician John Faye. He's just completed writing his memoir, The Yin and the Yang of It All, and we have an incredible conversation that you, of course, will not want to miss. But first, I want to take a minute to remember Jim Steinman. I first became a fan of Jim Steinman when I was a little kid. You know, surprisingly, it wasn't the symbiotic relationship with Meatloaf that first caught my ears all those years ago. It was his contributions to the 1984 Walter Hill classic Streets of Fire. Sides A and B both opened with Steinman tracks, but it was the one that rode the flip side, the epic Tonight Is What It Means to Be Young, that blew me away. I had never heard anything like it. It was bombastic and chaotic, and it built like a fever to a glorious release. It felt like a song written about the most magical moment that may have ever existed. That's just how Jim wrote. Big. Everything was big. And as the years went by, before I knew his songbook inside and out, I found myself finding songs that I loved that gave me the same kinds of feelings. And every time I found that they were one of Jim's, and I felt stupid. Of course they were Steinman tracks. They sounded like motorcycles and thunder, and the piano lines danced like raindrops, while the guitar riffs sounded like they were erupting out of the head of a guitar like lightning bolts. He painted in loud strokes meant to be belted at the top of your lungs, whether you could reach the note you were going for or not. His music sounded like Boris Vallejo paintings looked like passionate sonic D&D campaigns. The kind of songs that if you're in a bar and one comes on the jukebox, there is a chance that you might be about to find yourself singing a duet with someone across the bar that you have never met in your life, should you just happen to lock eyes with them at the right moment. In the land of rock opuses, Jim made The Who seem like Rodgers and Hammerstein writing Carousel, while he was churning out Andrew Lloyd Webber epics left and right. He was a genius songwriter, a maestro, and now, sadly, Jim Steinman is dead. But I don't think Jim would want us to be sad, because 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Rest in peace. My My guest today has been a staple of the Philly music scene for more than 2 decades. As the driving force behind the bands The Caulfields, John Faye Power Trip, Ike, John and Brittany, and the Meddling Kids, his music has been featured all over. From WMMR to Melrose Place to MTV to Little Steven's Underground Garage, just to name a few. He has currently just finished completing his memoir, tentatively titled The Yin and the Yang of It All. He is a true master of power pop songcraft, and I am honored to have him here on the show with me today. Folks, join me in welcoming John Faye. All right, I think we are recording. I am here today with the great John Faye. John, thank you for joining me on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Nate, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
I am too. So one of the things I love to do when I start these things off is to talk about some weird connection that I have. So my weird connection with you is, and I found this out randomly after the fact, but I used to have an acoustic duo maybe like 11, 12 years ago, maybe even longer than that. Time is a flat circle at this point, but I had this acoustic duo with this girl, Jenna. And it turns out she was the female lead in the Deathbed music video.
Oh, Jenna Holcomb was the
That's exactly right.
Like that.
Yeah.
Damn.
So small world. There is our minor connection.
She's awesome. I'm still Facebook friend with her, and I communicate with her every now and again. And
she's great people.
Super cool person. Yeah.
And an amazing voice. Like when we were playing together, I really thought I was going to ride her coattails to fame.
Well, ironically, like, I don't know that I've ever heard her sing.
Oh, really? Oh my God. She has an amazing voice.
At the time, she was dating the male lead in our video, this guy, Derek. And we were like, you're awesome too. You should be in this video also. So
it's perfect.
But I mean, she totally made that whole video.
She gives great faces in that video. Like her disgust face is perfect. So tell me a little bit about growing up. Like, what kind of music was playing around the house?
Okay. Well, interestingly, so I grew up in a house with just my mother and 3 older sisters, all of whom came over from Korea.
Oh, wow.
So my mother had no kind of like context for rock and roll or Western music whatsoever. But my sisters, being teenagers at the time when I was, real little, they were pretty much into the stuff that was happening at that time. So my early musical diet consisted of a lot of Beatles, a lot of Beach Boys. They got into like a pretty serious like 70s singer-songwriter kick for a while. So I listened to a lot of Carole King, a lot of James Taylor. I remember one of my sisters was big into Cat Stevens at the time. So, it was a pretty serious amount of what was on the radio in like the early 70s,
Yeah.
That's what I consider my first phase of music. Because, when you're preteen, you're pretty much influenced by whatever is happening, with the older people in your life, I guess.
Absolutely.
And, so, it was pretty much what was on the radio. So it was definitely like the AM gold, K-Tel era when I was little. And then, when you hit when you hit puberty and your hormones start to happen, all of a sudden, like, you're into a little bit more, edgy stuff. So that for me was like, buying like, Get the Knack and like Candy-O by the Cars. Yeah. And stuff like that. Cheap Trick Live at Budokan, those were, and then, also like a lot of, so this would have been like late 70s. So like the first kind of music that I really kind of like felt was like, this is my stuff, was kind of like that new wave, kind of punk rock kind of thing, like the CBGB scene. I loved the Ramones, Blondie, Talking Heads, all those kinds of bands.
Yeah, I mean, that completely makes sense. Listening to your musical output, it kind of, the influence is heavy there, like, especially, bands like Cheap Trick and stuff like that, just that kind of power pop, like really good hard guitars.
Yeah, very much part of my musical DNA. I don't think you can ever really extract that
right.
from who I am, But, also at the same time, I had other, friends as a teenager who, we got into like, I was very big into AC/DC, B-52s. It was just like a random sampling of like seemingly disparate records that we kind of shared together because we were always hanging out, and it was that, The Wall. Everybody listened to The Wall.
Sure.
Pink Floyd.
Sure.
But yeah, that was definitely a time when I felt like, I had like an inner fantasy life of wanting to play music. I wasn't able to do it for a while, even having these thoughts because I didn't play an instrument for a while. Eventually, when I was like, in maybe like ninth grade, I would say I started playing the drums fairly seriously. And that was my first instrument. And so I kind of like entered into the world of playing music through, learning how to play like Stuart Copeland's drum parts in The Police very badly.
It's a perfect place to start, though, because
it was a very good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah. What a great drummer. So, while you're playing drums and before you actually get an instrument to be able to do that, is songwriting even a thing at that point? Like, do you have like ideas in your head?
I have a funny story about that. So songwriting in the sense of lyric writing is very much in my head by that point. In fact, when I'm about 10 years old, my friend from down the street and I compile a notebook that is just full of like parody lyrics, like dirty parody lyrics to various songs on the radio. And, it was kind of like not only like my first experience of like, writing, if you want to call it that, but it was also kind of like my first feeling of validation from that because, it made my friend laugh his ass off. I'm like, rhyming shit and tit, So,
yeah, of course.
So it's like I got a little bit of a taste of, kind of the rush of like creating as twisted of a start as that is. And of course, my family finds the notebook and I get in huge trouble with my mother who literally makes me read the lyrics out loud.
Oh, no.
Before tearing each page out of the book and crumpling it and disposing it into the trash, one balled up, dirty song at a time. So it was quite the formative experience.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's really funny. That's actually how I got started writing songs as well. And I feel like it really taught me song structure, just kind of understanding, verse, chorus, stuff like that, bridge, that kind of thing, in making these goofy songs that I would never today play for anyone,
Right. Well, I know that like, I don't know what our age difference is, but like in the period when I was growing up, I mean, the pop song structure, that classic structure was pretty much all you heard.
Yeah. Yep.
So you had a nice intro, you had verse 1, pre-chorus, chorus, verse 2, chorus 2, bridge,
Yep.
And it kind of went in a very logical way, which, they did it that way because it works.
That's right.
So
that's exactly right.
But yeah, so like that is all part of like, maybe why I am kind of in that world of, power pop song structure and, very kind of like beholden to traditional golden AM era pop music,
No, it totally makes sense. So you're playing drums. Are you kind of like how I started? Are you immediately joining a band? Like, are you playing with other people or are you playing by yourself?
Not immediately, but not too long after. I bought my first drum set off of a friend of mine who actually was a member of my first band. So we were kind of developing our musical tastes simultaneously. We were listening to a lot of records together in common. And, we didn't have a band right away, but we were kind of, I guess it would be called jamming, like he had a bass. I had a drum kit, which was his drum kit until I bought it for $40. And then, eventually we kind of linked up with a couple other like-minded classmates. And, by the time I was in like 11th to 12th grade, I did have a band.
Yeah.
We didn't have all the pieces. Like my friend who I bought the drums off of actually wasn't in the first band. He would become kind of a member of the later edition of that band. So when we played our first gig in 11th or 12th grade, I think, we had to recruit our math teacher to play bass.
Really?
On half the songs. He would only learn half. So half the show is like this bassless, white stripes thing happening. And then the other half, there's a little low end going on. So
nice.
It was a complete debacle.
So, are you doing originals at that show, or is that like mostly covers? Or?
We had written songs. It's kind of interesting. Like all of these memories that I'm kind of running through with you, I recently put into a book that I've been writing about my life for the past few years. And so this story of our first gig is pretty vivid in my mind because I've, took a few months to write about it. But
okay.
So basically we started our show, which was like a Halloween dance at our high school, with 2 cover songs. We played, I Will Follow by U2.
Nice.
And we play, and of course, in the early 80s, people are going crazy, when they hear that. And then we went right into Twist and Shout by the Beatles, which was, an equally like rabid response. And then our third song was one of our own.
Nah.
And when I tell you that the place like cleared out like immediately, like you couldn't have like written it more horrifically for the band.
Yeah.
So it's like, as soon as you hear that thing you don't recognize, it's like, oh, let's go out in the hall and eat Pop Rocks or something.
Right. So did you have to audition for that gig, or was that like
our guitar player, and to this day, I don't really remember how he convinced our school to let us play. It was basically like, hey, free band.
Yeah.
And, we kind of like hyped it up because our math teacher was in the group and all that. So, yeah, there wasn't really an audition process. I was just told to show up, which I did.
Nice. So did you build like any kind of following at that gig? Were there people who?
Oh, no. There was a serious sort of like, reevaluation of what we were doing after that gig. But however, the guy the main guy that I was with in that group did go on to be part of like the next incarnation of the band, which my other friend who I bought the drums off of was also part of. But, there was always this desire to write our own songs. Like it was, we learned covers by necessity because, you can be serious about writing songs and only have like 6 of them when it comes time to like play a show or something.
Right.
So, so we learned a lot of cover songs. We did, like I said, Police and, whatever we could, cobble together. Yeah. But the goal for me and my bandmates was, we want to be songwriters. We kind of were into that. Yeah. So, and they were awful songs, but you got to write all the bad ones to get to the good ones, I say.
Right. That's right. So, at a certain point, I'm sure it had to flip into like, oh, we got this. This is something, right? Music is what I want to do. Kind of talk through like how you got there.
It didn't honestly take long for me to get there. When it came time, like when we graduated from high school and we all grew up in Delaware, I had the option to either go to Temple here in Philly or go to the University of Delaware, which was in the town I grew up in. And my other friends were all going to Delaware. And that is literally what drove my decision to go there, was because I wanted to keep my band together.
Yeah.
And we took it very seriously. We started playing gigs on campus that year. And that was kind of like the road to generating a little bit of a following.
Yeah.
We would play, like house parties, and, we would play at the basement of the student center and this and that. And by the time maybe the next year rolled around, we decided to fire me as the drummer and make me just the lead singer. Okay. So we finally got like a proper rhythm section, like two guys who were actually a little older than we were, who had been in a band before, whose instruments were bass and drums, because like nobody's natural instrument was bass.
Right.
So that really kind of gave the way we sounded this huge kind of like step forward in terms of like sounding like we knew what we were doing.
Yeah.
And the songs were slowly getting better, and I was able to focus more on singing them well, since I wasn't like, craning my neck, to reach a mic stand to the left of the hi-hat,
Yeah.
And just like being out of breath the whole show. So it really kind of like went from there. Like I remember that year we were the band that was picked to play our, spring fling concert, at Delaware, and we opened for like Southside Johnny or something like that.
Very nice.
And so that, from there, Newark at the time, and apparently still is. I've heard in recent years that like Delaware is like the #1 party school in the country or something ridiculous like that. But even back then, it was pretty happening in terms of like, people went out multiple nights a week to bars that had live music. So there were lots of opportunities for us to play, and it just started to, become a thing over time.
Yeah. What did you go to college for?
Besides keeping my band together, I studied English.
Okay.
Initially, that was not my major. I, for whatever dumb reason, I thought that it would make my mom happy if I studied business administration, and I damn near failed out of it.
Oh, wow.
And so at a certain point, I was like, Mom, I'd like to switch my major to English, because I knew that I would probably be pretty good at that. It was easy for me to kind of make that transition. And so it was actually a very smart move, I think.
Yeah. So you moved to the front of the stage now. At what point does the guitar enter your hands? Immediately, or? No,
that's another thing. Like, I'm trying to be a songwriter and I still can't play, a melodic instrument.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of my early songs were, they by necessity had to be in collaboration with other people. Or I would hum an idea to the guitar player, or, those kinds of things. So it wasn't until, so this band, at a certain point, we called the band the Beat Clinic. Mm-hmm. And it went through a couple of iterations with personnel changes. And at a certain point, the rhythm guitar player from the band decided to leave. So it was like, well, we could hire another, like by that time we had auditioned a lot of people for different instruments, to find the original drummer and the bass player. And like, I was like, I'm not going through more auditions. That's the worst. So, it was just the right time for me to pick up the guitar. And it was, I was actually, I played a little bit, not in the band, before I actually had to like pick it up and play it in the band. So I was by that point serviceable, because I was beginning to write songs with my own chord ideas and all that stuff. Yeah. So by the time I actually had to play the guitar in the band, I kind of was able to do it fairly seamlessly. Because I was only playing my songs. So if it's a pretty sad commentary if you can't even play your own songs on guitar that you wrote. So interestingly, like that's kind of also one of the things that kind of nudged us into the realm of being like, we're all original from this point on. No more covers. In part because like I didn't really feel like learning the chords of songs that I didn't know how to do already because I write them. So from that point, like this band, the Beat Clinic, actually like the same personnel changed our name to the Caulfields, which was the band that eventually got the record contract in the 90s.
Yeah, sure. And that's kind of where I kind of first heard you guys, and I didn't realize that you were you. 'Cause, I'll give you a little background. The way I first kind of put everything together on who you were and all, I was at I used to work at Sam Goody. Okay. And got it. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we got the golden ticket to go to the Parallel Universe album release at North Star.
When the first Ike album comes out. Yep.
Yeah. And we went, and first of all, thank you, Open Bar. I got probably
we tried to make it a thing, the night for all.
But at some point, I believe in that set, I think you guys did Devil's Diary. And it was like a moment of like, boom. Oh, now I know who this is,
Nate, I think you've hit the nail on like the story of my life. It's like, nobody just automatically knows who I am. They have to go through. Oh, you're that guy. Now okay. Cool.
But at that moment, it all started making sense, because being a 90s kid, I was familiar with the Caulfields. So, and I was a big, Y100 listener, and I was a big, DRE and MMR back then. So like you were definitely in my orbit, Yeah,
we're definitely instrumental in, launching the Caulfields onto the national stage. Because once our record came out on A&M, it's, you kind of have to break it in your home market for that to sort of say, okay, we'll roll this out a little further.
Yeah.
And then once we had Philadelphia, then a lot of different places started to fall in line. So we were very fortunate.
And I know you're putting in the work before that, but all of that seemingly, I'm just looking at dates and trying to remember history, but seemed to like really explode pretty quickly.
Well, that was the power of having a major record label pushing your band at the time. It's obviously different now in the 2020s, but back then, if you had that kind of a record company behind you and really pushing something, I mean, they were going to get it done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it seemed like an overnight thing, maybe, but it was actually... by 1995, we were like 9 years into trying to be a band. And because to me, like it's all one long progression, even from that band that bombed at our high school. Like to me, like that is the beginning of it. I mean, there's no break in the line as far as that's where it starts.
That was one of the really amazing things to me. Kind of doing the research I've been doing, preparing for this, was just what you're saying. Like there is seemingly no stop. Like you started rolling and then just kept going. And I mean, that's incredibly admirable because, there are things like, when the label issue kind of goes through and all, like that could be the kind of demoralizing thing that sends people, backing, but you kept...
No doubt. And trust me when I tell you, there were things being whispered in my ear by people who cared about me, like, oh, well, buddy, maybe you should go back to school, or you had a good run, man, like that kind of thing. And it was definitely, so the second album and the band's demise happened in 1997. And after that, I mean, there's not a very long kind of like feeling sorry for myself, but a short period of time where I'm like, all right, what do I do now? And luckily for me, I just came to the conclusion that I was a lifer in all of this, and just, kept going. And I was very fortunate because I still had some people in the business, maybe not the label side of it, but like radio people who knew managers and stuff like that, who really still wanted to support me and help me out. So it wasn't long until a friend of mine in Atlanta, who was a DJ at sort of like the Y100 equivalent down there, hooked me up with a manager that he knew. And so before I knew it, I had management again, and we were off and running on a project that became known as the John Faye Power Trip, which was between the Caulfields and Ike. And to be honest, like, that record did better than our second album on the major label, because we had like a lot of things in place. We were able to tour, do a lot of dates with this guy, Matthew Sweet, who was really, really big in the 90s.
I'm an enormous fan of Matthew Sweet.
And it's like, I can't just say a name like that and assume everybody knows anymore,
Sure. I know.
But like, yeah. So like, but yeah, we did a huge block of dates on his In Reverse tour in 1999. And that kind of like propelled our independent record to a better place than our second A&M album got, because that got no shot at all. So that kind of made me also realize that, there is life as an independent artist. You can make things happen on your own. Yeah. And there are, I realized I had a small but loyal network of people all over the country that, kind of wanted to see me succeed. So I was able to kind of like tap into that.
Yeah. I mean, it's you came in a really great time for that kind of radio, especially like a local radio station that kind of has its own energy and has its own kind of built-in committed community. And the kind of music you make fit perfectly for those kind of stations. So to me, it's not even a surprise that, you would find success, label or not, with that kind of network.
Well, it certainly didn't hurt to have people rooting for you.
Yeah.
But even then, I mean, when you are not on a major label and you're competing with records that are on a major label, it kind of makes it twice as hard to get airplay, because, they're almost always going to add the record on, Interscope before they add, your independent little thing. But we were really lucky with like Y100 at the time. The single off of the John Faye Power Trip album got put into this thing called the Cage Match. I don't know if you remember the Cage Match.
I do.
It's the call-in thing. It's like they play two songs and you get a vote. And so somehow our song won the Cage Match like 13 nights in a row, which convinced the programming department that, yes, the song should probably be in the rotation. And from that, we also were put into this kind of contest thing called the Big Break. It was kind of like a battle of the bands thing, which at the time I was like, oh, come on, man. I'm like 33. Do I have to play another fucking battle of the bands? This is where I'm at. But amazingly, we won the Battle of the Bands, and so this was at the TLA, and then the grand prize that you get as your big break was opening for REM.
Oh my God!
Camden at their big, E Center, whatever it was called at the time, show. So, so we had some pretty cool, big, high exposure things that happened for us because of all that stuff. So, but it was all very, kind of like everything was worked very, very hard for, like it wasn't just handed over.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And, beyond just the work, like the strength of the songwriting, I mean, by this point you're getting, and this is, personal opinion, but I feel like your voice, you found your voice, what your voice is at this point, and your strengths, and you play them very well. It's one of the things I've always appreciated about your music.
I would agree with your assessment. I think that at that point, I'm really kind of like coming into my own as the songwriter I aspired to be. Whereas, there are definitely flashes of that all along the way. But like when that Power Trip record came out, like when I heard it in its entirety, I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty good.
Absolutely.
Or at least it's, it's like, it was a collection of songs, like all 12 of which I had, really invested myself in. And I just felt really, really good about it. And I think in terms of my actual singing voice, I had really kind of like broadened my range a little bit. And I think I was beginning to sound more like the person I sound like today. Right at that point, I started to sort of like develop that.
Yeah. So Power Trip kind of folds into Ike.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
It's this, same people that toured behind the Power Trip we decide to like name it. Like I wasn't 100% comfortable, having that be our project name like forever. And the guy that was producing us, at the time said, you should really consider naming yourselves like a band. If this is going to be like a continued thing, you guys are a band. So you should name yourselves a band. I was, that makes sense. So what do we do? What do we name it? And we went through, that was a process. I can't remember any of the other bandmates' suggestions, but I do recall very specifically that every one of us literally hated everybody else's ideas. Like there was not one vote to corroborate anyone else's name ideas. And I think it was my ex-wife who at one point, I was like bemoaning the situation to her. And she said, well, why don't you just name your guys' band after like a name, And we were watching a lot of South Park at the time, and the baby on South Park is named Ike.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that's a great name. We're going to call it Ike. 3 letters, can't misspell it. Like the Caulfields always had our name misspelled. It was like the story of the band's life, people leaving out the second L and all that shit. Mm-hmm. So I was like, you cannot misspell Ike. If you have to be a complete moron to not be able to spell this name right. So I think that was the thing that pushed it over the top, really.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah. So, like I said, Parallel Universe, we got the demo when we got the, what did they used to call it? The promo, when we got the golden ticket, and, we kept it in constant rotation in the store. And by we, I mean me, because I am a guy who loves, like, you play right into everything I love about like pop music. So like, infectious chorus, chunky guitars. That's like, it's almost like you were built to write music just so that I could hear it. But I became really obsessed with that album. Like, it's so good. Like, it's so good. I was just listening to it again the other day, kind of leading up to this. But
well, it's very interesting you bring that record up because, Mark Rogers, he's the host of Hometown Heroes. It's a local music show.
Yeah.
Delaware. He literally put on my Facebook this morning. He was like, I was ripping CDs last night and I found this, and it's a screenshot of his, Mac, or Windows rather, like screenshot of his playlist of Parallel Universe. But next to Parallel Universe, in parentheses, it says new, but with no shrink wrap. Like, oh, we must have sent you like my personal shit burned copy of it because that's all I had.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you move on from there. You get to sing the national anthem at the Eagles game, which how terrifying is that? Because I can't even imagine. That's a tough song. Like that. I mean, beyond being in front of all those people, that's a really tough song.
Well, you know what they say about the national anthem: start low.
Yeah.
So I actually, it was, the interesting thing about that experience was it was very last minute because at that point I had a manager from Philly who was also managing the great Lauren Hart, who, as you know, is the go-to anthem singer.
Absolutely.
For any event.
Sure.
And she was supposed to do it. And I think she got sick or something happened. So I literally got called, maybe like 24, 36 hours before the event. Hey, you want to sing the national anthem at the Eagles game? Sure. Why not? I mean, I had sung the national anthem prior to this. It was not my first time ever singing it.
Yeah.
I had sung it. Weirdly, there was a guy who came to see the John Faye power trip in the early days of Ike, who was in charge of like the basketball games at LaSalle. So he had me sing at LaSalle basketball games on occasion. And I had also done like a Philadelphia Soul indoor football.
Okay.
John Bon Jovi owned football team. So I had sung it a couple of times. But none of that can prepare you for the experience, because it's literally the largest crowd I had ever and ever will sing for in one shot. It was like 68,000 people.
Unbelievable.
And you have a lot of time to get nervous because they make you get there like 3.5 hours before the time you sing it. So you're like sequestered in the bowels of the stadium for like hours. So I'm just like sitting there, like, eating off the deli tray and blowing into this fucking pitch pipe that I brought, to like, I think I better do it in B, like, oh, say. And I'm just like singing, oh, say hundreds of times over just to like get the opening note in my head. And then you walk out and luckily they give you these in-ear monitors. I mean, the echo is so like unbelievably disorienting. Like if you didn't have it, you would feel like you were like on some acid trip probably.
Yeah.
So I had the in-ears and I blew into that pitch pipe literally like 10 seconds before my name got announced, just so I could hear the note one more time. And then I did it.
It's awesome.
It was over in a flash.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. You talk about the echo. I was in my nerdy past. I was in marching band, and we marched at the Meadowlands. And the echo, we're blowing big giant horns, and the echo, like it was one of the most surreal things ever, because first of all, you're, big, huge lights, big, huge stadium. And then also sound makes zero sense, so.
It's like an infinite feedback loop or something, you know, it's like, all right, well, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
As an experience, definitely once in a lifetime, just being able to hear that number of people respond at the end.
I'm sure.
You hit I totally milked Land of the Free for a few extra seconds, let that note hang.
Yeah.
And then, let it sit in the air. And it was cool. It was very cool.
That is awesome. Yeah. So, you guys then, Into Philadelphia gets played at all sporting events all over the place. Like, how kind of touch upon like your relationship with Philadelphia. You're a Delaware guy, but, you are like.
Yes. And yeah. So I grew up in Delaware, but I actually was born in Philly.
Oh, okay.
My mother met my father in Philadelphia in Northeast Philly. So this would have like the year before I was born is when they met. And when they had me, we, my mom and my sisters had been living like in Pennypack in Northeast for a couple of years because my mom was taking her medical residency at Einstein Hospital.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so they were definitely like Philadelphian and my father lived in Philadelphia all his life. Shortly after I was born, we actually moved to Trenton until I was like up just about 3 because my mom got a job at the Trenton, like the state hospital in Trenton, New Jersey. And they had this housing that was like on the grounds of the hospital. I guess it was cheap. So the whole family like lived there until I was like just about 3. And, you know, I guess in your early days of being a doctor, you move around a little bit. So it wasn't long before she got a job that resulted in us moving to Delaware when I was 3.
Okay.
So I did have, a little bit of a connection to Philadelphia, you know, just from birth, but all throughout high school, you know, I would take, as soon as we got our driver's licenses, we were driving up and hanging out at Zipperhead on South Street. And, you know, where else are we going to buy our Dead Kennedys t-shirt, you know?
Yeah.
So Philadelphia had always had this pretty mythical stature in my head. Obviously, like the first time coming up with the band to play in Philadelphia, we played at J.C. Dobbs. It was our first show in Philly. And so I, feel like my connection to Dobbs, which dates back all the way to like 1987 or 88 or something, lasted all the way through the 2000s, because I eventually became like the open mic night host there for like 4 years.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so the connection to the music scene and the city was always kind of there, but getting to the song Into Philadelphia, which you brought up, by the time that song was written, I was living back up here in like Elkins Park, which is like the kind of like the first northern suburb outside of the city.
Sure.
And that's where the genesis of the song starts to happen, because when my son was born, I found that I had to drive him around multiple nights a week in the middle of the night in a Honda Odyssey to get him to go to sleep. He was very, very unruly, cried a lot, early teether, the whole thing. And so that song basically comes from this one middle of the night drive that we do, where I would always take random turns, and somehow the turn I chose put us heading south into the city in the middle of the night. And just the line, "Baby, do you want to take a ride into Philadelphia?" came from that drive.
That's awesome.
And so a few weeks after that, the song gets written in its most basic form, and then I take it to the band and we develop it, and eventually it gets on our album In Real Life. And right around that time, you might recall that WMMR started to sort of get back into the space of really promoting local music.
Yeah.
And Jackson, who is the afternoon drive DJ at the station, and he's been there basically since the year that Into Philadelphia came out, because he's really the person that I credit with that song being anything of notoriety, because he put that on a local music CD compilation that the station released called Jackson's Local Shots Volume 1. And it was the lead track on there. And as the lead track, they began to play it in regular rotation on WMMR. And it was from that exposure that all the stuff with it getting played at sporting events and whatnot started to come from that. So it's all just a series of serendipitous, fortunate events.
It's awesome. It's awesome. You mentioned those CDs. That's one of the things I really miss about local radio, and I miss about radio stations in general, is like those local CDs, or like even like the Sonic Session CDs and stuff like that. Just things that are so like of the time in the area that, they're like little kind of time machines. I love it.
Absolutely. You think about how much things have changed in terms of just like how people listen to music or appreciate music now.
Yeah.
Back in a certain era, it was like such a huge deal to like, be able to get a ticket to go to the Sonic Session to see somebody play unplugged in a recording studio. And now, a band will just like make a video, a YouTube thing, and up it goes. And
that's right. I'm surprised at how many bands break having never played live shows. Like it's really incredible. Like what?
Yeah, it's a whole different thing, But I do think we are, for all of the advances in technology, which I do my best to embrace. Actually, I mean, I think it can be really useful. But I think what we're missing is that sense of community.
Yeah.
And that sense of like, just being in a common place together to appreciate something in the flesh.
Yeah, I kind of...
Not just because of the pandemic. I think in general, we lost that before the pandemic.
Yeah, I just kind of did a thing on a little mini episode earlier in the season about my relationship with WXPN, and that's one of the things I touch upon is like it's one of the last communities I feel that actually feels like a community. Like the people who listen to XPN will kind of give anyone a chance. Like you go to one of the festivals or one of the shows, they'll pay attention to every band as if they've ever heard them, before. And it's really rare, and it's sad to me because I'm somebody who was raised on music and raised on local radio, and that's kind of what made me want to make music and want to be a part of the community. And I just don't know that it exists like it used to, and it bums me.
But I guess the challenge is one of the things that I kind of came to the conclusion of is if you don't see your community out there, start it,
build it. Yeah,
build it.
Right. And that's and that's kind of where this came from, and this project, this website, and all, because I want that community back. Like I like having music discussions, and I feel like no one talks about music anymore. It's
this is great. It's awesome.
Well, thank you. So moving from Ike, you do John and Brittany. And you get some good success there on Little Steven's show. How did that kind of come about?
Right. So Ike has a pretty substantial run. Like we're together for about 8 years and we have a couple different lineups. And around the time of our 2009 record, which was called Tie the Knot with All That You Got, I met this girl, Brittany Rotundo. And as events unfolded, we became a songwriting partnership and duo. It's pretty interesting. I mean, she didn't, when we met, she was not a musician. She didn't play guitar in her life. So it was kind of like, it's very cool and interesting for me because as we began to write songs, the way we got her into, I guess what you would call, playing shape, in order to like be able to like play shows on stage was we would go around to open mic nights, probably 4 nights a week for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
And for someone like myself who had been through like a lot of different career phases by then, it was very interesting experience to kind of like really go back to, I mean, I never played open mics before that period, really. Like, none of that kind of scene didn't exist when I was forming my first bands.
Okay.
So I was kind of getting into like a community that I had never really been part of before. But it was really cool, actually. Like we met a lot of people through that. It was almost, I think I would not be exaggerating by saying that we developed a lot of our early following through that, the open mic.
Really?
Network. Yeah. And then as we got to the point where we were starting to make records and we had, some really excellent drummers and bass players that helped us along the way and engineers too. Then we started to kind of shift this duo thing into like, well, this is a rock band and we can go and we can play electric shows and really, kind of like take that approach with it. And that's when, so we had an EP and then we did our first full length, Start Sinning. And that's the album that got the attention of the Underground Garage.
That's awesome. You talk about those open mics. That's connection number 3. So we did, Jenna was in the video. I was at the record release for Parallel Universe. Number 3, we played an open mic night together at the Grape Room. So
right. We were very often there on Monday nights to have the Grape Room, which was always fun. They had some really good people there. We were obviously Scooter was an old friend, and they had cool people playing there too. Different kind of crowd than like the Center City vibe.
I always loved it there, and that was when I gave it a push at one point to just play original, and that was kind of like my home base. Like most of the shows I played were there, and always had a great crowd, whether they were people I brought or not. Like everybody very responsive to the music. Like it was great. It's one of the, I got to get back out there. It's been a while.
Yeah, since I kind of immersed myself into that kind of community, and we would play not only like the Grape Room, but we would cross the bridge and play a lot of open mics in New Jersey. And it's all kind of like, slightly different crowds at each one. And you realize like this is a real connection with other musicians. There's really no better way to like really make friends with other musicians than to do that. Because you're all kind of like, well, we are all just getting 2 songs a night. Yeah. So most of the time you're just hanging out and talking about, whatever, records you're into, or, oh, we've got a proper gig next week. Will you come?
Yeah, sure.
That kind of thing.
So we were talking about the Underground Garage. Did you guys, placed 3rd in the year-end poll with for the coolest song in the world. Did you get to perform on the Underground Garage at all, or was there any?
They don't really do like live performance stuff.
No.
But what it was is like so Little Steven Van Zandt, who everyone knows is Little Steven,
right.
Guitar player for the E Street Band. He's Silvio from The Sopranos. Major human being, and very conceivably intimidating, really. So when we first put Start Sinning out, we had some friends who are actually still very dear friends, this band from Central PA called the Jelly Bricks, who had already themselves had numerous coolest songs in the world. And I called them up and I said, what's your connection to this? Because I think, like the Ike stuff, I didn't ever really, push to, satellite radio or anything. I was in the world of terrestrial radio with that stuff. But they sort of like pointed us in the direction of a guy who had helped them. And so I sent this guy, Mark Hirschberger, who was just he had like a tiny power pop indie label in North Jersey, and basically said, would you mind pitching this?
Yeah.
And we'll put like your imprint on the one sheet along with our little label. It'll be kind of like a co-promotion kind of thing. No, not for money or anything. He just did it out of the goodness of his heart. And I couldn't believe like how quickly he got it heard and how quickly he called me back and was like, hey, how would you like to be the coolest song in the world in 3 weeks? And I was just like, get the fuck out of here.
Unbelievable.
And, it just sort of happened that way. And the cool thing for me is that, Steven selects these songs or okays each one personally. Like, it's not like he's just a figurehead. Like, this literally is his radio station. Like, nothing played on that station that he doesn't approve of, which to me is like the coolest, validation.
Absolutely.
And so, I still have the audio of like him introducing the song for the first time, because I don't know if you ever listened to the Underground Garage on Sirius.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
He usually has like a little bit of an intro, tells a story, And then, this week's coolest song in the world, John and Brittany from Philadelphia, and it was just awesome. And
that's so cool.
And we were just really lucky to then, kind of like make some friendly connections with some of the bands that are kind of like regulars on that station. So we ended up doing some cool stuff up in like New York City, played the Mercury Lounge with a couple of the bands that do really well on Underground Garage. And so, yeah, that was really awesome.
Very cool. Very
so like
cool.
that kind of became John and Brittany's thing, like that's where we were like, well, this is where our audience potentially is.
Yeah.
And, the EP that we put out after Start Sinning had a Coolest Song in the World on it also, the song St. Valentine.
Yeah.
And Little Steven actually named that EP Stories to Be Told, which was another kind of cool aspect of the whole thing.
Wow. How'd that...
Well, it was just like we were talking to the producer of Underground Garage, and we were like, well, here's our EP. I don't know if we know what we're going to name it yet. And then, I don't know, I can't remember like the exact timeline, but like not too long after that, he was like, well, Steven thinks it might be cool if you named it Stories to Be Told. We have a song at the end called Story to Be Told.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, all right, well, I think if this guy has an idea to name the record, we're going to take that idea.
Yeah, so, I guess we could go with that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That makes complete sense. And it actually is. It's a really good title for what it was, So, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that was our last record.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty good run. I mean, we had 2 EPs, a full-length album and a live album in like 3.5 years. So it was kind of a busy time.
Yeah, definitely. So then you move into doing everything yourself on Meddling Kid, huh? So
yeah. So I think after all of that, so Ike never like officially like said we're done. It was just like lives were changing. Brett and Susie, who are a guitarist and bass player, and Ike, who were at the time a married couple, had a kid. And John and Brittany was just like naturally getting busier. Yeah. So I kind of came to a halt. And when John and Brittany ended, I was, I definitely had like this thorn in my side. Like, you know what? I'm just going to do everything by myself. I don't need nothing. So I went in with my friend Stephen LaFascia, who had engineered all the most of the John and Brittany stuff. Actually, Brett from Ike engineered the first John and Brittany EP. But Steve LaFascia was the guitar player from this band Jealousy Curve, who you
familiar.
And he's a great recording engineer, and so he was basically my only partner in the studio, and he recorded me making every noise on that record, essentially. And it was, it was a cool thing. Like, I don't know that I would deliberately say, like, I'm going to do that again.
Yeah.
But it was cool to know that I could. And I think it turned out pretty well. But,
Absolutely.
Now I'm at this point in my life when I make new music, and I am currently writing songs and work and, thinking about what my next thing's going to be, because it's been a few years. But I would say that I'm just kind of open to everything. Like, if somebody who I think would be a good person to play on a record of mine is willing to do it, then great. But, if I have to do it myself just for convenience or whatever, I'll do that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Meddling Kid thing was a pretty, it was like a personal accomplishment that I was proud of, to be able to like basically do everything on a record and have it sound like it was a record. Yeah. Instead of just some idiot just bumbling around and trying to like throw a bunch of tracks together.
Yeah, and not just a personal accomplishment, but also, there's some personal songwriting on there. Church and State is a very strong personal song.
Sure is. Yeah, thank you. I mean, that song was sort of inspired after my mother passed away in 2012. And it's just a super personal kind of me talking directly to her and kind of, and yeah, I mean, it was really important to me to have that song on there and have that be part of what I was doing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the theme of a lot of my songwriting over the years, is that I seem to be willing to put the heart on the sleeve.
Yeah.
As it were.
Very
For
much.
better or worse. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if if it's TMI or something, but you know, it's funny because I remember a songwriter friend. I think this was after one of the Ike albums came out. It might have been Where to Begin, which was the second to last full length. And he was like, John, I really like the songs on this album. Are you okay?
Uh-huh.
I'm like, well, the answer to that is complicated.
Yeah.
But, you know, to me, like, that's part of what songwriting is there for us, is to serve as that outlet where you can say whatever you want and be vulnerable and not feel inhibited to like really just pour your heart out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's that kind of release that, you know, there was that song is going back probably 10 years or so ago that I forget the woman's name who put it out, but 3 a.m. where she's talking about putting the lyric down on the page to save the person writing it or whatnot. And like, it was one of those lines that when I heard it, I was like, that might be the best line I've ever heard in my life. Like it just hits so close to home.
Yeah. You know, I mean, but you may or may not be aware that I've been teaching songwriting for the past.
I am at Drexel, right?
Drexel, yeah. And that's one of the things that I really try to impart on the students is to, you know, don't be afraid to tap into that place where you're kind of letting your defenses down and you're willing to speak your truth in what you're writing, you know, because I know for a fact for myself, I spent a lot of years kind of tiptoeing around the point.
Yep.
With what I wanted to say, you know, and it wasn't until, you know, like we had talked about earlier, like at a certain point in my writing life when, you know, in spite of a couple flashes of that along the way, it just became my default way of writing songs. And it took kind of a lot of years to do. So I'm trying to like, let the kids know, like, start working on that now.
Yeah.
So maybe by the time you're, you know, 33 and making your fourth record, you'll really have something going for you.
So you said you're working on a memoir. Last I saw, still titled Church and State? Like,
no. Title has changed numerous times.
Okay.
So the update is the book is done. I actually finished it end of last year, did the principal writing, like got that completed. And then I did 2 full read through self edits at the beginning of this year.
Okay.
Which didn't end until about 3 weeks ago, probably. And so I have changed the title to The Yin and the Yang of It All.
Okay. I like it.
And one of the reasons that I switched it from church and state is that I think the connotation of that might have like just sort of veered into like, what is this, like some kind of political, religious, something going on, which it wouldn't have been. But, you know, I had fiddled around with like a number of like titles that referred to songs of mine. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me that like none of those like fully encapsulate what I was trying to do with the book. And part of that is because I didn't really know until it was done. Yeah. You don't really see all the threads until you can really look at it in this macro kind of sense once it's done, because as you're writing it, it's all just like, well, this is the chapter about this. I have to cover this. And, and then it starts to unfold to you as the writer, what the threads and the themes of your story are. And the major part of it that I kind of realized is that like my life has been this series of dualities, much like the yin and the yang. And it's been sort of like this process of coming to grips with those contrasting forces that make up who I am and what my experiences have been. Every time something really great happens, it's counterbalanced by something potentially like rather tragic, and so and I think my life has been this process of, understanding that those things must find a way to coexist.
Yeah.
In order for me to ultimately be a happy person, because if you are just sort of like blown in whatever direction the wind blows you, whether it's into the good column or the bad column or whatever, you're not going to have a very centered life and mental state. So I think, part of it is I write in the forward of the book about the one tattoo that I have, which is actually a yin and the yang symbol on my arm here, which you cannot see. But it's a yin and a yang, and it's also got shamrocks in it. And it's supposed to represent my Korean half and my Irish half, because my father was Irish, my mother was Korean. It's an admittedly unusual mix. And it has, for most of my life, up to a certain point, it felt like a very incongruous mix where I didn't really know who I was or where I stood or who actually accepted me. It felt like neither side really fully embraced me. And so it kind of became like, I have these opposing forces within myself, and it's just disarray.
Sure.
And it wasn't until music kind of like came into my life where I realized like I may not have feel a huge connection to my Korean ethnicity or my Irish ethnicity or, Anglo ethnicity, but I definitely discovered that I have a musical ethnicity. And that's the sense of community that I have felt time and time again with different sets of people and musicians and music lovers through every phase of my musical life. And just the idea of that's my ethnicity.
Yeah.
And those forces coming together kind of make me who I am. So when I was trying to figure out, like the phrase, the yin and the yang of it all is part of a sentence that was already written in the foreword of the book. And then I was just like, you know what, maybe that's the title. Yeah. And so I think that the more I sit with that and the more I think about it, the more I think that that's going to be it.
That's awesome. Is that so? Are you planning on self-publishing this, or are you sending this around? Or
I actually have been sending it around, but I'm very prepared to self-publish it also. You know, I'm new to the publishing game, and I'm lucky in that I have a couple of people who are connected in that world, and the feedback that I've gotten so far has made me optimistic, but it also has made me realize like how much work it's going to be just to get the attention of an agent,
right?
Who would then have to work hard to get the manuscript, to someone who would be interested in it. So, in my own head, I'm thinking I'm going to do my due diligence to try to get it published through one of the big publishing companies. But if that doesn't happen, I'm fully committed to getting it out there one way or the other.
Well, that's awesome. I really can't wait to read it. Like, you have a great story and you have a great career, and it must have been really cathartic to be able to reflect on it all.
Yes, it was definitely cathartic. It was a huge learning experience. You learn a lot about yourself when you really go back over the phases of your life. And, I learned some good things about myself. I remembered some very bad things about myself,
sure.
All of which is sort of laid bare. I have a lot of memories in there where I look back and maybe knowing what I know now would have done things differently, as I guess we all would. If you look back at what you do when you're a teenager or in your 20s or something, and you have the benefit of 30 more years after that to kind of formulate a strategy, you probably would do a lot of things differently. But overall, you're right. I mean, it's definitely a very big cathartic thing, especially in talking about the stuff. There's a lot of personal stuff that's not directly tied to my musical life. So, I mean, the book is obviously a lot of it has to do with my musical life, but a lot of it is more my upbringing, my family, my relationship with my mom, and those kinds of things. And I think writing about that stuff, it was even more illuminating to me than just going over the music stuff. Yeah. Like the music stuff is in some sense almost the comic relief. You're a musician. You've got funny stories from probably just about every experience you've ever had.
Oh my God, unbelievably so.
Or, traveling or, doing whatever it is musicians do together, and I kind of wanted to make sure that I portrayed my particular life in that world as accurately as I could, because it's definitely the farthest thing from a sex, drugs, and rock and roll experience.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And so, when I think about like I talk to some people who are trying to kind of advise me on the strategy of the book, and they're like, well, who's your audience? I'm like, well, it's multifaceted, but I think, a good number of people like me who are, working musicians who have just done it for years and have been through a lot and accomplished a lot, but maybe are not household names. That's what I call like, the musical middle class or whatever.
Yeah.
Not really middle class because we're all impoverished, but, like the people who have done shit, there's a lot more of us than there are superstars.
Definitely.
So this one is for all my musician friends who are in the trenches that are, can relate to, just salivating over a deli tray and just praying that the club, gives you something to eat.
All too familiar. I love it. Well, sir, would you like to take the Jawntlet at this time? Would you?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, it starts with the one-hit wonders. The first one, Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth?
I'm not a fan of either one of them as humans. Well, I don't know. I don't know Sammy Hagar that well. I've heard bad things about Diamond Dave, but I will say I'm a much bigger fan of the David Lee Roth era of Van Halen than I am the Van Hagar era of Van Halen. So
makes sense.
I will pick David Lee Roth.
Okie dokie. Number 2, Biggie or Tupac?
I have to admit, like, I am not super familiar with their entire body of work, but I will say that, like, I think Tupac is somebody that I think I would gravitate towards a little more. Okay. I think his the personal aspects of his writing, talks about his mom and stuff.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little more drawn to that than the Biggie stuff. Okay. If I had to pick a hip hop artist, I'm more of a Run DMC man myself.
Same. Number 3, Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
Nirvana.
Okay, dokie. Number 4, Beatles.
Okie dokie.
Okie dokie.
I sense that that's not usually the answer.
No, it's weird because all of these, well, some of these, Hagar or Roth, I think I've had one person pick Hagar, but for like Nirvana or Pearl Jam, it's really give or take. Like it's really been pretty much 50-50. So like, it's really interesting to see like kind of who gravitates towards who.
What's interesting about that choice is that I really respect Pearl Jam a lot, but I just have here's my rendition of me being a Pearl Jam fan.
Okay.
The Fixer, which is their single from a record called No Code. I don't know how many albums into their catalog this is. When that song came out, I was like, finally, Pearl Jam has a good fucking song. I liked it. That's my mentality towards Pearl Jam.
Okay.
Of course, it's going to be hugely unpopular with most people, but like, I liked Nirvana from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like I liked everything about that band from the beginning. And obviously they don't have the longevity because we all know why, but
right.
I just think like as just a band that like did stuff that like just immediately appeals to somebody like me, like, I would pick them in a heartbeat.
Yeah. It's still to this day blows me away that they played JC Dobbs. Like that really just.
They played JC Dobbs and the Drexel Armory, which actually Ike did a show in the Drexel Armory at one point back in the day. And I was like, this place sounds like shit. I'm sure that Nirvana show sounded horrible because they were probably 3 times louder than us.
Right.
like, why would you have a show here? But yes.
Number 4, this is the big one that everybody always battles, Beatles or the Stones?
Oh, well, I think for me, it's got to be the Beatles, but I do love the Rolling Stones. I mean, it's in a little bit of way, it's a kind of an apples and oranges thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the Beatles were certainly more influential on me as a musician and songwriter, but I dig the Stones. I mean, I find them very compelling.
Yeah. People who listen to this are probably sick of me saying this over and over again. But for me, like, the Beatles are like, kind of like just a bunch of geniuses who wrote really brilliant songs. But the Stones are just like to me, the best band ever. Like, like as a band, they are just like awesome.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at each individual in the Stones, I mean, they're all just super interesting to me. Like, yeah, like I love Charlie Watts. Like as a drummer, I always was just interested in him, just the way like a lot of like people who came up playing the drums in the era that I did, it was all very much like, if you weren't trying to be Neil Peart, then fuck you, Yeah. But like I was listening to the drummers who played on the records I liked, which is why I was very into Stuart Copeland. I was very into Ringo, and I was into Charlie Watts because I just really liked the way he just thwacked that snare drum.
Yeah.
And there's, nobody can play like 4/4 like that guy. I mean, you can just tell when you hear certain drummers. I mean, if you just played the drum tracks, you can tell it's him, and you can tell Ringo is Ringo. You can tell Stuart Copeland is Stuart Copeland. That to me means that that's a very musical drummer who really puts an imprint on the band they're playing in.
Yeah, to me, that's the secret ingredient to like really special music is if that backbeat can, just kind of consume you and take you in, then that's the meat and potatoes to me, and I say that as someone who can't play drums. I can't even think of moving hands and feet at different, forget about it. I can barely play guitar, but
but you're right. I mean, like the Rolling Stones are just a super interesting band from one member to the next. I mean, they all have like a very distinct imprint on the music,
Yeah. Yeah. Next one, favorite Beatle.
I'm going to say Paul McCartney, but it's very close.
Yeah.
Well, it's close. It's like a three-way tie for first, with Ringo being a distant last. But I mean, like, John, Paul, and George are all brilliant, and they all had very unique sides to them. I think I'm probably not saying John because I just like the fact that McCartney has survived and is still doing it, because that's what I aspire to do. Like, I would love to be making, if not quote unquote relevant, at least music that I'm personally passionate about that late into my life. I mean, I'm getting close now at this point.
Oh, man. The last one-hit wonder, Prince or Michael Jackson?
That's easier. I'm going to say Prince. I'm a big Prince fan.
Yeah,
not a Michael Jackson fan, but Prince could do it all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the top 10 countdown. These are just 10 things. I use the word Jawn, if I haven't explained this, to mean anything. So it doesn't have to be music. It doesn't have to be, It can be whatever you want it to be. All right. Okay. So the top 10 countdown, number 1, what was your first Jawn? What was the first thing when you were younger that you were obsessed with?
I'll keep it in the realm of music, and I'll say that my first obsession was buying 45s,
Very nice.
records, because that's how I kind of, when I first started making allowance, I would buy 45s, and eventually I made my way up to purchasing my first 12-inch K-Tel album in which,
very cool,
for the young ones or the younger ones, that's kind of like the 70s version of now that's what I call music.
right.
Compilations. But yeah, I mean, my first obsession was obtaining music. Yeah.
Awesome. Number 2, what's your current Jawn? What are you into right now?
That's a very hard question. I don't know that I'm really into anything. Survival, man. I'm into survival. Just being a good human being and not being too reactive to the world's many hand grenades that it drops on us every week. I'm just trying to live an even life. That's my current obsession.
Perfect. I love it. Number 3, what was your first concert?
That would have been the Police with the Go-Go's as the opening act.
Very awesome.
In 1982.
Okay. Where at?
Philadelphia Spectrum.
Very nice. That must have been a great show.
It was obviously life-altering. Actually, I have to amend that. That's my first rock concert.
Okay.
I've been to a live show the year before, I believe. And that was, I was in Hawaii with my mother visiting my sister who was living there at the time. And my sister got us in, or got me in as a minor, to see Don Ho.
Very cool. Very cool.
Drunk. He was hammered. And it's just such a hilarious memory because I'm like 13 or something, and I'm at this place called the Polynesian Palace in Honolulu. And I remembered that, I don't know if you ever watched the Brady Bunch growing up at all.
Religiously, yeah.
Okay, so in the Hawaii episode, Don Ho makes a cameo.
Yeah.
And he says to Bobby and Cindy, "Oh, you can catch me and Sam here playing at the Polynesian Palace." Da, da, da. So, years later, so that's early 70s, now early 80s, I'm seeing Don Ho at the Polynesian Palace. He's been there the whole time. So it's no wonder he's hammered. So he gets on stage and he's telling really dirty jokes, and I'm just laughing, and my sister's blushing, and and the whole audience is these old ladies basically. And he's like, "Hey, I want to, a couple of you come up on stage and we'll do, just sing this one with me." And I remember this like it was yesterday. He's like, "Okay, put your hands in my front pockets and clap 20 times.
Whoa. Yo, Don Ho.
You couldn't get away with that now, but
No.
1980, whatever. As a 13-year-old, I'm like, oh man, this is the greatest night of my life, right?
That's awesome.
You could buy the Don Ho tiny bubble doll. It was like a thing of bubbles, soap bubbles. You unscrew his head, and it has like one of those little blower things on it. You could blow bubbles with.
Excellent. Excellent. Perfect branding.
So that was actually my first live performance, but the Police was the first rock concert.
Okay. Number 4, what was the last concert you were at?
Oh, that's easy. It was me.
That
because
definitely.
I actually played my first show this past Thursday.
Oh, really?
Yes, I played at Jefferson University, which used to be Philadelphia University. It was very interesting. I was booked as a solo performer. They put you in the corner of the student lounge behind 2 plexiglass panes. Really? It was cool. I mean, people were appreciative, but I was just like, this is just the weirdest. It's kind of like, a lot of times nowadays, like you'll see like a drummer on stage behind these ridiculous plexiglass things, which, come on, do they really you really need to do that in a big, but that's what was in front of me. So I so badly wanted to do like should I smush my face against, kind of like try to recreate like the cover of The Lodger by David Bowie or something, but I didn't.
Awesome. Number 5, what was your favorite concert of all time that you've been at?
Man, that's a really hard one. There have been a lot that I really hold in high esteem, but I think if I really think about it, I saw U2 play at the Tower Theater when I was a teenager.
Wow.
Promoting the War album. This was their last theater tour before they really blew up. And the intimacy and the power of that show was, that's the kind of thing that left a lasting impression on a guy who was at that point then thinking like, I might want to do this. Yeah. Because, this... Bono's like hanging from the balcony with his white flag and everybody's afraid he's going to fall off, and it's just like, that was like the drama of the live concert. I mean, I had been, obviously been to that Police show and was very into the Go-Go's. So I saw them multiple times as a teenager, but none of those shows had that danger, I guess. Yeah. Element to it, and it was just super exciting to be part of that show because cool. I had been a U2 fan since like their first video on MTV, in 1981 or 1980 or something. So even at that point, it felt like, oh, these guys are getting too big. And then, of course,
little did you know,
all these years later, they're playing, the giantest stadiums on earth,
Number 6, who did you never see live that you wish you would have, and they could be alive or dead?
Oh, that would be Prince again.
Yeah.
I totally wish I would have seen him, and I did.
I had a chance to see Prince on the Purple Rain tour. A ticket was purchased for me, but my parents found out about what the stage show looked like and what occurred during the stage show, and then they sold my ticket. So, and I never got to see Prince, but they're both passed now. But don't think that I did not let them know every single chance I could that they stole magic from me.
That hurts, dude. Wow.
Number 7, name an unappreciated, John. Name something that you think should be bigger than it ever was.
That is a tough one. I'm trying to think of maybe something that's not music, since all of these are music related. There's lots of artists that I listen to that I think should be bigger and just aren't. But then I also think, well, if they were bigger, would that somehow drive my liking of them into a direction I don't want? Like sometimes you're very protective of the things that you you'd think should be bigger,
Very true.
Like I kind of would approach it like that. Let's like, if something's not as big as you, not commensurate with the amount you like it, it's almost like that's okay.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to share this with everybody.
Very true. I completely accept that, because I am one of those people who I'm like, oh, you should have seen them before when they were playing,
Well, I mean, I'm sure everybody has those bands, and for me, like a lot of those bands, like people have heard of them, they get recognition to some degree, but like, why aren't they like massive?
Right.
Like, I guess a band like that for me would be, I don't know if you like XTC at all.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, they have, I don't know how many albums they have ultimately, probably like 15 or 16 records, the vast majority of which are, in my opinion, like musical masterpieces.
Right.
And, a lot of people, if you say the name or if you play like a handful of songs, like, oh yeah, I know Dear God. Oh yeah, I know this or that. But, not as big as maybe they could have been. Of course, that also has to do with the fact that they stopped touring because of the singer's stage fright issues in the 80s. But, I think everybody has those artists that they feel a deep connection to that maybe are not like the biggest names in the room, but I think a lot of people are comfortable with it staying that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 8, and this is a pretty tough one, I understand. So you don't have to put too much thought into it. But what is your favorite album?
This might seem as a left field choice for someone like me, but I'm going to say it. Back in Black by AC/DC.
Fantastic.
Because it just has everything I love about rock music in it. I mean, in addition to being, just like a front to back, just banger and masterpiece in terms of just like, you don't necessarily associate AC/DC with songwriting, but every one of those songs is memorable and everyone is catchy and everyone is impeccably arranged. And yet it's this, I can't remember the exact quote, but it kind of resonated with me. Like a long time ago, I read something about them in some music magazine. And the writer was like, AC/DC's music is like, when you hear it, it's as if it has always existed.
I like that.
Carved into the rock of primordial rock and roll essence.
I like that.
And when, and it is kind of true. It's because, like they're still making records and they're not breaking any new ground with any new records. Yeah. And yet you can't help but love it each time. How do they do that? Any other band or artist, you would say, well, they're kind of like spinning their wheels and repeating themselves.
Right. But it's what you want from them.
But they kind of give you what they know will satisfy you, but not in a way that's like, yes, you have heard it a million times, but not quite like this.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know how they do it. Like that to me is like kind of mystical about them. And
Perfect.
for me, Back in Black, I don't know if you want to get into the Brian Johnson v. Bon Scott argument.
I thought about putting them in the one-hit wonders, but
there's just something about that record that is just so perfect to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the one I'll go with.
Number 9, name an artist whose output you will consume anything they release, even if you have to be apologetic for it.
This may be kind of left field too, because I don't discuss it all that much when I talk about music, but Juliana Hatfield.
Wow, perfect. I love it.
Who is an artist that I believe, I haven't bought physical copies of stuff that she's done in the past few years because I just don't buy CDs anymore. Most of my listening is through streaming, but like for a while there, I literally had like everything she put out, whether it was like, a single with B-sides on it or, whatever it was for years and years and years. I think I have more physical media by her as an artist, whether it be with the Blake Babies, her first band, or her solo stuff, than any other person or artist.
That's
and
great.
I still listen to her most recent stuff, and she's done some cool stuff. Actually, she did like a whole covers record of like Police songs, and she did a whole covers record of Olivia Newton-John songs.
Really?
So I'm just like, she's just being her. Like there's no rhyme or reason or even like the slightest nod to commerciality in what she's doing at this point, which I totally respect. It's like, I want to do this music. Fuck you if you don't like it.
That's right. That's awesome.
That's awesome to me.
I saw her a few years back. It was just her and Evan Dando, and they essentially were just trading back and forth playing acoustic. And it was one of my favorite shows of all time.
Was this World Cafe Live?
It was, yeah.
I might have been at that, actually. I think
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Opening act was Lady Lamb the Beekeeper.
Right. Yeah, I was definitely at that show because
that was such a that was an awakening moment for me too, because the second I heard her voice, I was like, okay, need to buy her disc and follow whatever she's about to do, because
she was fantastic. Yes.
Yeah.
I remember her.
The 10th and final Jawn.
Okay.
What is your favorite Jawn of all time? could be anything. Ever, all time.
Well, I don't know if this qualifies as an answer, but laughing.
That absolutely qualifies. I love it.
Because I have realized that if I have something that makes me laugh every day, it tends to be a good day, regardless of any kinds of obstacles or heavy stuff that may happen. In fact, before I was getting ready to come on this podcast, I was watching this movie that was recommended to me by a friend. It's on Netflix currently, called Bad Trip.
I've heard good things.
Eric Andre. I think I live in an apartment building. It's a 4-unit apartment building, and the other ladies that live in this building are all, kind of a little older than me. And I was just laughing so maniacally, like I hear the lady that lives above me just kind of stirring. And I'm sure she was wondering, like, what's going on down? Because I'm listening to the movie on my computer with my AirPods in. So like, it's just nothing but silence. And then like belly laughs, just like the loudest shit you could imagine. And, it actually just, I guess you get some kind of endorphin rush from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just as good as music,
Absolutely.
So I put a high premium on laughter. That's my favorite thing to do.
Fantastic. So what's going on now? What do you got coming up? I know you guys were going to do the Caulfields reunion for 25 years last year, and then you did the single for Phil Abundance. What was that, this past December? Yep.
We did Level Views together as our benefit single. So yeah, we actually have some kind of cool Caulfields news that I'll share with you. This fall, I think the weekend of September 10th, we are going to do a live concert. It's going to be down in Dewey Beach, Delaware at the Bottle and Cork. And we are going to the plan is to make that a sort of a Caulfields and friends kind of a night. So we're putting together, a little bill that's going to involve probably like, friends of ours from the era in Delaware when we were kind of coming up in the ranks. So we're working on getting some people involved with that. And in addition to that, we are going to be releasing a Caulfields concert movie, which actually came about in a very interesting and unexpected way. We had been asked to play a birthday party.
Okay.
What it started out as is the wife of a guy that we have known for 25 plus years, a friend of ours, actually a very good friend of our bass player's cousin. It was his 50th birthday, and his wife contacted me, and basically it started out with, oh, will you guys do like a live stream for Frank's birthday? I'm thinking of renting a room in a pizza shop. We'll stream your Facebook Live into this monitor that it sounded all very quaint and pleasant. And we were going to all just play acoustic in our bass player's living room. So cut to like 2 weeks after that, I got a call from the guy whose birthday it's going to be. And he's like, listen, buddy, my wife spilled the beans and I was very appreciative, but I was also like, thank you, honey. But you know what? Fuck that. If I'm going to have the Caulfields play my birthday, it's going to be a real thing. So this guy was a sound guy back in the day, and he used to be very, I think he worked for this company called Clare Brothers, which is like, it's like the number one concert staging company in the world, pretty much. And they're based in PA.
Okay.
So like, this guy basically called in all these favors and put together his birthday party in this gigantic warehouse with like, so have you ever just walked in off the street into like the electric factory or something? That's what it was like.
Wow.
We walked in out of the parking lot and I'm looking at like a humongous stage, like 30 foot across, with the sound systems that hang from the ceiling. So we've come to find out they lent him, or so the story gets really weird. The PA that we used was the same PA that the Rolling Stones used in the 90s.
Whoa.
Which is a pretty fucking powerful PA system. And it had like a gigantic, like the mixer for the monitors was, 6 feet across, on the side of the stage. So we do this show and like, we knew that it was going to be that kind of thing going in, but until you see it, you just don't really grasp it. But we had the foresight to hire some people to record it and to videotape it.
Very nice.
So so the footage we got back and, the audio, I mean, it basically looks like we're playing like an arena show.
So cool.
So we're just going to like, we're going to cut out the like happy birthday to you and 8 songs and just use the musical performances and like intercut it with like, some other interview stuff and stuff like that. And it's going to look like a pretty cool concert movie.
That is awesome.
But like, what a weird, like who would have thought that that's what would have happened?
Seriously. All from a birthday stream.
Right. And then come to find out after the fact, he comes up to me afterwards. He's like, this isn't the last time we're doing this. You know that, right? I'm like, well, that's cool. But like, how are you going to get all this together again? And I'm like, I'm sure this PA is, if you had to rent it, it'd be pretty. He's like, no, dude, you don't understand. They gave this to me. I'm like, what? What do you mean they gave it to you? He's like, dude, they don't use this shit anymore because everything is digital now.
Oh my God.
This is a dinosaur of a PA. It's like, everything is like so much more compact. They would never send this out on the road ever again. So they're just giving it to me. Wow. I'm like, this is ridiculous.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah. So, we played through, whatever Stones tour happened in the 90s, that PA. That's
incredible. I wonder if that was, I don't know if you remember, but in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, they were doing small theater shows when they were touring with their, their big stadium shows. So like they ended up playing, I think, the Tower.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Because I will definitely say this PA was big enough to fill like Electric Factory, no problem.
Yeah.
Tower, no problem.
Wow. Unbelievable. So do you have a target?
We were loud.
Is there a target date for that, or are you guys just kind
target date is actually to release it the weekend we play in Dewey Beach. So the idea would be to have like almost like a premiere release show for that, like the night before the actual show.
Very cool.
That's the plan.
So if any of these cool cats and kittens who listen to this show want to find you on the social medias, how can they track you down?
Best thing to do is just go to my main website, which is just johnfaye.com, JOHNFAYE.com. It's got the links to everything you would ever need to know about me on there.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. This was amazing, and I'm so happy to have had you on here.
Thank you so much, Nate. This was really, really cool. Thank you.
My thanks again to John Faye for joining me on the podcast. You can find John on his website at www.johnfaye.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/jfaye, and on Instagram at JohnKimFaye. And be sure to be on the lookout for more information about the Caulfields reunion show at the Bottle and Cork in Dewey Beach, Delaware, coming this September. How exciting is that? If you have not done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast on all your favorite podcast providers and share it. Sharing is caring. Tell all your friends about it. And if you fancy yourself an overachiever and you want to get a little bit of extra credit, don't forget that you can earn yourself that super awesome Jawn Scout Merit Badge for Citizenship of the World by rating and reviewing us. The more reviews we get, the easier it is for people to find us and the more guests we can get on the show. Do it for the children. Don't forget to visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/yothat'smyjawn for updates and live streams. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at YoThat'sMyJawn, and find Yo That's My Jawn on YouTube for all kinds of video tomfoolery, including my cover of the Jim Steinman classic Tonight Is What It Means to Be Young that birthed my obsession with the late, great Mr. Steinman. Like and subscribe the heck out of that ish. We want to hear from you. Reach out, and touch some Jawn. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 2.3. Thanks for taking another ride on the podcast train with me. Join us next week for yet another mini-sode of the podcast. We're going to celebrate somebody's birthday. Guess who? Me! Until next time, everybody! Hey yo, displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. Your taste in music doesn't have to be measured. Yo, That's My Jawn is a Lonely Monk production, written and produced by yours truly, Nate Runkle. Theme song by Phil Tyler Music featuring Nate 3.0. Special thanks to Fox Run Brands, DX Ferris, Andrew Scott, Natalie Runkle, and the incredibly brilliant and wickedly stunning Katie Daubney. If you or anyone you know has any ideas they would like to share or any guests they would like to hear on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at yothat'smyjawn@gmail.com. Or you can leave an audio message for us and possibly hear yourself on a future episode by visiting anchor.fm/ytmj/message. Until next time, be sure to displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure and shout to the world, yo, that's my Jawn.